I want to bring up our keynote speaker, Tachara Masemba. In the wake of numerous televised executions of African men and women at the hands of the state, in the wake of a U.S. president who resembled black people in appearance only, and in the wake of an inability of any element of our struggle to explain these events in a compelling way, Tachara Masemba found the African People's Socialist Party, an APDF. It summed up the police as a colonial occupying force and Barack Obama as neocolonialism, or black power on white face, as it summed up both a symptom of a dying social system built on the backs of Africans and other oppressed people. Tachara soon began working in the African People's Education and Defense Fund under the leadership of Deputy Chair and President Onizine Yeshitela, with the assignment to build the economic work on the ground in St. Louis, with the understanding that the economic question and the political question are one. Tachara is continuing the building of an economic institution for St. Louis as a strategy for APDF to feed, clothe, and house African people as a necessary prerequisite for black power. Here from St. Louis to give you a powerful presentation of our APDF institutions and our updates for the Black Power Blueprint Project, please give a round of applause for Brother Tachara Masemba. Uhuru.
All right, I want to start by saying Uhuru. I'm so glad to be here. Tiffany, can you show us the back of your shirt again? APDF is the baddest nonprofit on the planet.
You want something to say about the table over there?
So I want to start off by thanking Allison Haney and Uhuru Furniture and Collectibles, Tiffany Murphy, Nanayard Grant, and everybody, Ali, everybody, Ruby, everybody in the store who invited me here and who are doing the day-to-day work to not just put another economic institution in a gentrifying neighborhood, but to struggle for self-determination for the oppressed sector of this society. I also want to thank, first and foremost, Chairman Omali Yeshitela. Yes. Let's give it up. We saw him on video. Who has forged the way for African people and for a way to overturn an oppressive social system. And as you can see from the video, he is a serious scientist and beautiful artist. I want to thank Onizine Yeshitela, who I report to directly, President of the African People's Education and Defense Fund, who is leading all of the economic work that you will see here today. She is a force to be reckoned with, and we'll hear a lot more about the work that she's leading. Okay, so between 4 short years of 1347 to 1351, over half of the population of Europe died of plague. Queen Isabella of Spain said of Christopher Columbus's voyage, quote, "I'm ready to pawn my jewels to defray the expenses of it if the funds in the treasury should be found inadequate." Europe was locked into a vicious cycle. Unable to engage in capitalist production because they lacked an accumulation of capital, and unable to engage to accumulate capital because they were locked because they lacked capitalist production. So in other words, they did not have the startup money necessary to produce things they could sell, and they didn't have things that they could sell that would provide the startup money to accumulate capital, i.e. to create capitalism. So how then did capitalism come into being? Anybody? Slavery. So we say the same way the idea of whiteness and the concept of Europe itself came into being. And that was through slavery and colonialism. And for the past 600 years, not only has our labor, our land, but our resources have been used to make Europe and America rich. while simultaneously making African and African people poor. Capitalism then was born as a parasitic system living off the body of Africa. And like any parasitic relationship, Africans could not pray it away. We could not vote it away. The relationship had to be fundamentally changed. Enter APEDF, and most recently, the Black Power Blueprint, a project of the African People's Education and Defense Fund. This has been a 45-year-long struggle. Economic self-reliance is something that we've taken serious since day one, when we did fish fries, car washes, and picked orange groves in Florida. So this is a consequence of our understanding that this is a social system created on slavery and colonialism. And it is a social system that relies on the exploitation of labor, land, and resources of African and other oppressed people all over the world for its existence. So this is what has informed our economic struggle. We are developing our economic work as a new political front, says Chairman Omali Yeshitela. Unlike the recent past, where our economic work was designed to fund political activity, it is now strategically geared toward the conquest of political power. It is defined as part of the struggle for dual and contending power with the dying social system. This is taken from An Uneasy Equilibrium, written by Chairman Omali Yeshitela. There can be no self-determination without self-reliance. One of the things that distinguishes our party and puts us firmly in the camp of Marcus Garvey is that of our building institutions of self-determination. This has been part of a strategy to build dual and contending power in a contest with the existing social order. Omali Yeshitela. So as a consequence, you are able to sit here today in Uhuru Furniture and Collectibles as part of a struggle for dual and contending power. We have built Uhuru Jiko commercial kitchen located in St. Petersburg, Florida, and as you will see later, will be located next in St. Louis, Missouri. So this is part of our struggle for dual and contending power. We have built Uhuru Pies and Furniture in our struggle for dual and contending power. We created Uhuru Foods and Pies over 35 years ago to raise resources for the programs of the Uhuru House by creating and selling good quality African comfort foods. Now we are expanding Uhuru Foods and Pies to create our own sauces and our bottled drinks. You can read about it in the latest issue of the Burning Spirit. Not just explaining the world, but changing it. It has been the vision of Chairman Omali Yeshitela that we have our own media to be able to tell our own stories of the African working class. We have Black Power 96, located in St. Petersburg, Florida, and we'll have a satellite location coming soon to St. Louis, Missouri. The One Africa, One Nation Marketplace offers a way for our community to make a living, create businesses, and employ ourselves within an outlet to promote our products and services. This is part of the mission of Black Star Industries to create economic development and community commerce for and between African people worldwide. 14 years in Clark Park here in Philadelphia. We started one in St. Petersburg, Florida recently, and in St. Louis, Missouri in July of 2017. So these are all programs of the African People's Education and Defense Fund. Our Uhuru houses have been the African community centers for political, social, and economic life since the early 1980s, and now we're here to put one down in St. Louis as well. So we have St. Petersburg, Florida, Oakland, California, and in St. Louis, Missouri. Aquaba Hall. Our Uhuru House features Aquaba Halls, an affordable community rental space for baby showers, weddings, parties, family reunions, etc. So we witnessed a key transformation in 2017 when St. Louis, when African People's Education and Defense Fund landed in St. Louis after the Mike Brown incident in Ferguson. And St. Louis is a vital location because it is bordered by 8 other states. And it is right in what is now the heart of the protest capital in this country. And so we want to bring our understanding of dual and contending power. We want to put institutions on the ground, and we want to bring the struggle right here to the Midwest. So Ferguson, Missouri, 2014, the African People's Education and Defense Fund enters St. Louis. The struggle for dual and contending power enters Ferguson and St. Louis. In November 2016, APEDF President Owens-Ane Yeshitela was sent by Chairman Omali Yeshitela and the APSP to find an Uhuru House to create programs that bring political power and economic development to this community. This is what dual and contending power looks like, we say. In one bold swoop, Deputy Chair Owens-Ane Yeshitela investigates the LRA process and identifies and secures the magnificent properties for the Black Star Industries and APEDF. So you see here the building that is labeled the Uhuru House is a 9,000 square foot building. It is 3 stories, 12,000. We also have 12,000 square foot property that you see here to your right. It was a former boathouse where they sold boats. This will be our new Uhuru Jiko commercial kitchen. So we're going to renovate that as well. You see here, this in the top right, you see this very dilapidated looking building. And next to it in the middle, you see this vacant lot. We're going to demolish the building, and the lot will be used for our One Africa, One Nation marketplace, which many of you may be familiar with here in Philly. And the picture of the window here is the inside of the new Uhuru House as we renovate that piece by piece. And I want to say something about the LRA process and Deputy Sheriff President Owens-Ane Yeshitela, who leads the work of APEDF. The LRA stands for Land Reutilization Authority. And this is a committee of about 5 people, 3 of whom are elected by the mayor, if I remember correctly. And they've been, this entity has been holding property since at least the 1970s. And there was a plan on the books called the Team 4 plan in St. Louis. And this plan called for a plan to triage the city of St. Louis. Okay, so we're talking about gentrification, which you see here. It was a plan to triage the city of St. Louis. They identified one section as a section of St. Louis that needed to be conserved in its present state. This was the wealthier section. They identified a section that should be set aside for redevelopment. So these were what would be considered middle class, kind of rising, economically wealthy communities. And then they identified North St. Louis, where you find primarily the African population, and they designated it as an area of blight and suggested that no economic development should come to this community until such time that massive economic development could be done in like one fell swoop. So they recommended that no economic development come to North St. Louis. So as a consequence, you have over 25,000 abandoned buildings. You've had an increase in crime, no services whatsoever except the bare minimum, trash pickup and police to contain the devastation that they created. And so the LRA process, the LRA was designated as that entity that would allow them to bank land, to hold land. Like you have a savings account at a bank, they would just begin to accumulate property and land and hold this property and land until they desired to sell it to large-scale developers. And so they have all of these properties, and they make it difficult for African people or any person with very limited resources to acquire this land because they have all these stipulations. And so Deputy Sheriff Owens-Ane Yeshitela, she came in St. Louis, she identified this institution, She navigated it, she got all the information, she went in, she made contacts, and she fought for the process, and we purchased many of these properties directly from the LRA, who are now selling the properties, but primarily for white developers. So this is a critical thing, and we also want to teach that process to people so that we can struggle to get back our land and hold our land. So housing has been secured at prices less than a car. So this is the consequence of all of this lack of development, is that housing prices have dropped in addition to what we saw in 2008, 2009. So now we are able to at least purchase properties at prices that are less than a car. The properties of APEDF and Black Star Industries can be made available for organizers, for participants of the African Workforce Program, and for the African community. Black Star Industries and the APEDF are taking back the value of African labor to benefit the African working class, mobilizing all African contractors and skilled African and Mexican tradesmen and women. Over 35 people and companies were met with, bids were submitted, and reviewed to choose the team that would begin the transformation of the future Uhuru House. So we got bids for creating outdoor venues. And so we've had to really undergo this entire process of economic development, and that's not what we specialize in. But we've purchased these properties, we're organizing contractors, and we're turning these dilapidated properties. The Uhuru House, for example, had been abandoned for 12 years. So you know what happens when a building that is abandoned. First the roof goes, then the elements come in, then the floor goes, and everything starts to rot. So we took this and transformed it. We're organizing workers, laborers, and struggling to fight against gentrification. So, we say for the past 600 years, Africa's land, labor, and resources have been used to make Europe rich, while simultaneously making Africans in Africa poor. But we are organizing for dual and contending power within a parasitic social system and changing the fundamental relationship African people have to this social system. We are organizing the community to build institutions. Institutions that allow us to contend with the white ruling class for dual and contending power. So I want to go back and when we dual and contending power, we identify as a period in history where the oppressed have captured an element of political and economic power and are able to hold that power in a contest with the ruling class. So, for example, we had the organization had an incident in St. Petersburg, Florida, where we had an African killed by the police, and then the power structure put a black police chief in place to try to placate African people and try to calm the resistance. He sided with us. He declared the Uhuru House there an embassy and said that nobody could be arrested in the Uhuru House. That was a temporary situation that we were able to struggle for dual and contending power. Those periods do not last forever. One side has to win, one side has to lose. But our struggle now is for an independent economy, and dual and contending power is a tactic in that process. So we're still summing up imperialism, as well as the black petty bourgeoisie or middle class, and struggling for real power over our lives. These are some volunteers at one of our volunteer days as we reconstruct the Uhuru House in St. Louis. So we are rejecting charity and organizing those who stand in real solidarity with us. That means white people. In conclusion, for the past 600 years, Africa's land, labor, and resources have been used to make Europe and America rich, while simultaneously making Africa and Africans poor. But APEDF is overturning that. The Black Power Blueprint, which is a project of APEDF, is overturning that. We say Uhuru Jiko Commercial Kitchen is overturning that. One Africa, One Nation Marketplace is overturning that. And the Uhuru houses are overturning that. the NTU Volunteer Brigade, the brigade that organizes volunteers to work on these projects, is overturning that. So what can you do to change this? You can volunteer at Uhuru Furniture and Collectibles as you are today, and we thank you, and we hope you stay for the canvassing campaign. If you have any questions, you can also provide material support. We're attempting to raise $300,000 in the first phase of this redevelopment, and you see a before and after picture here of the Uhuru House that we're redeveloping in St. Louis. And even this picture is not the most up-to-date picture because now we've gone in and done the painting on this first floor here that you see. So we need your material support as well. And we need people to join the movement. So even beyond just coming out and volunteering, and we need that, but we need people who want to join the movement, who want to join the struggle for dual and contending power, who want to join the struggle to build economic institutions of self-determination. Donate at ucaring.com/Black Power Blueprint. See us on Facebook at Black Power Blueprint or APEDF, African People's Education and Defense Fund, or visit us online at www.apedf.org. Thank you.
Thank you.